Welcome to a Literature Ministries Youth Mission Report. And we are blessed to have Elder Camille Metz with us today. Brother Metz, what is literature ministry for those who may not be familiar?
The Literature Ministries in the Mission Conference includes the work of our young people, Youth Rush canvassing program where they work in the summertime. It also includes our members who are working as literature evangelists. And then, of course, we have something for everyone, every member, total member involvement, where they can share glow tracks and sharing books.
So there's literally something for everyone in this Literature Ministries work.
That's right.
All right. Well, here is a special testimony from Melanie about the literature work she's been a part of.
So I was canvassing this lady, and she was just wanting to give me a donation. She ended up giving me $100 and asked me for change. And I was thinking, she doesn't even want the books. Why is she just wanting to help out? I mean, yes, it helps out for school, but I was there for a different reason, to bless her with these books. And so after that door, I just felt like I couldn't go on. I sat on the curb and I decided to just pray to God. And I prayed, God, please help me. I don't want to feel like a salesman. I want to be a soulsman. Please just show me why I'm doing this. And the next house, a man opens up and I start canvassing on a kid's book. And he was very interested in what I was doing. And so he asked me for another book that I had. And so I showed him The Great Controversy. And he points back to his friend in his house and he says, we were just talking about this. And I was like, what? Like so amazed. And he was just saying that we were just talking about how there's something going on behind this world and there's like a good and bad side. And then here you come knocking on our doors like we were just talking about this. And so they invited me inside and I come in with my leader and they were just asking me, so what is this book about? If you could tell me in a couple words, what is this book about? And so I prayed before because I knew I couldn't speak what entirely it was about. So God really spoke and all of us really understood, and they decided to get the book. And before we left, the friend, he looks up at me and he points to the book and he says, Melanie, this is why you are doing this. And right there, I was like, whoa, I just prayed about this. Like, God, you're speaking to me right now. And it just really made me understand, wow, there is a great controversy going on. And this is why I'm doing this, because God has called us to be soulsmen. He has already won, and so we're just winning souls for his kingdom. And that's honestly what keeps me going.
Now, here in the Michigan Conference, we have what is known as the GROW cycle that we want to emphasize and try to get in every member's thinking, that evangelism is more than just the public campaign or just seeing people baptized or just giving Bible studies, that there's an entire cycle of evangelism that involves every phase. So for instance, the first phase in the growth cycle is the preparing of the soil of the heart through good deeds and community outreach and those just making friends for eternity. After that, we want to sow the seed of the gospel and start expressing spiritual interest and gaining see where their interest is and passing out, say, media and glow tracks and those kind of things. Then we want to follow up with the interests that are received by Bible studies, right? So we want to cultivate the seed that has been planted. And then by God's grace, as those decisions come to fruition, we want to see a harvest, usually done in public evangelism, where people make decisions for the Lord. And then even after people have decided and become baptized members of the church, there's an ongoing preserving of that crop through discipleship so that every member can be a missionary for Jesus, and the cycle goes round and round. Now, when it comes to the literature work is a key element, especially, even though it can touch on all the phases, is particularly in that sowing of the seed, right? And so this is where we understand the literature work to have its most significant impact is sharing and distributing the Word of God like the seed of truth that it is. In fact, we've been told in Christian Service, page 146, our publications are now sowing the gospel seed and are instrumental in bringing as many souls to Christ as the preached word. Whole churches have been raised up as a result of their circulation. In our next video, we'll hear a testimony from Jemima about all of the different things that she's experienced, and one experience in particular that really impacted her life.
I went up to the door and this young man comes out and I start canvassing him, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to get anything. And so I'm only canvassing out of memorization. And in the middle of my canvas, he just stops me and he just says, "Hold on a minute." And so I just wait there, and he comes out with his mother, and I start canvassing his mother, and she seems really, really interested in the book Peace Above the Storm, which is Steps to Christ. And she just kept emphasizing throughout the whole conversation how she needed peace in her life. And she decided to get Peace Above the Storm, and she went inside and got a $20 bill. And for that amount, I got to leave her with Peace Above the Storm and The Great Controversy. And just before I left, I asked if I could pray with her, and she's like, yeah, I really just need peace in my life right now. And so I prayed with her, and it was really meaningful, but I thought that was like the end of the story. But something prompted me to say, hey, would you like a receipt? And the lady said, yeah, sure, I'll like a receipt. And then she asked me, what was your name again? And I said, my name's Jemima. And as soon as I said that, she just started crying. And she cried for probably a minute, and she was just crying and crying and crying. And I'm just standing here like, oh no, what did I do wrong? I'm trying to comfort her, and it turns out later that her grandmother, her name was Jemima, and her grandmother had just recently passed away, and she had been a Christian. And so this lady was looking into her grandmother's life and trying to find Christianity and what it was all about. And that morning, she had just prayed that God would send her somebody that had books about peace. And then I showed up at her door with Peace Above the Storm. And I just think it was really powerful for me to realize how God can use me, and that he had already planned this divine appointment 15 years ago when I was born and my parents named me Jemima. And canvassing has taught me so much this summer. It's taught me that we can't rely on other people's relationships with God. We have to have our own relationship with God. Because when you're out there on the field, you sometimes feel lonely and you feel discouraged. There's sometimes no other canvassers that you can see. But God is always by your side, and he's with you, and he's there for you. And when you get discouraged, he's comforting you and saying, okay, just one more soul, Jemima. Just go for one more soul. And canvassing has taught me so much to build my relationship with God and get to know him not as the big guy in the sky, but get to know him personally as a best friend. And it has taught me so much that God can use anybody to be a witness for him.
Now, Camille, that was a powerful video. Jemima was telling her story about that incredible experience that she had and what an impact it had in her life, not just, helping the church in general, but her personally. She really grew through that experience that she had.
It's just the whole program is set up for that kind of experience. You're knocking on doors, you are ministering to people, and as you minister to people, you realize how hopeless you are in some ways. And so you pray, and you get rejected too. And so you pray even more, but then you have other young people helping you through the process. And so we see our young people being converted. And there's just countless and countless of stories of young people, there's lives that have been changed. But one of my favorite ones is about Andrew. Andrew really decided not to be part of the church anymore. I mean, if he came to church, it was just for the potluck time. And so he was not really, interested in the church. And then I invited him to come and canvass. And I want everyone to hear this story. And this is the next story you'll listen to right now.
I was always very influenced by my social environment and the people around me. In middle school and also in high school, when people that I knew started hanging out on Friday nights and playing sports and watching movies and this, that, and the other, I always wanted to do these things, but I couldn't because I had to go to church. And so religion was kind of a restrictive thing at that point in my life, and not always the most desirable thing to me. At the same time, I did go to camps and different events throughout the year where I had these revival experiences. So it was very emotional, and I'd want to commit my life to God, and I'd make these big pledges, but when I went back home, everything that I said, it pretty much ended up in me going back to life as normal. After graduating high school, I went to Michigan State University, and the summer of my freshman year, my older brother went canvassing, and he ended up taking some time off of school to attend a Bible college, and when he came back to school, he was telling me about how I should canvas. And this was a period in my life where I really didn't want to become Christian, and I really didn't even think it was possible, because every time I tried to come to God, it ended up in me falling away. But because I wanted to make some money, because I didn't want to be at home, all like these bad reasons, I decided to go canvassing. And I remember the second day that I went out, I was dropped off by myself in some mobile homes, and I thought, if I'm gonna be here all summer, I might as well start praying now. And I asked God, I said, Lord, please help me, because I was very nervous. And so I remember going up to the first door, and this Hispanic lady came out, and she opened the door, and she was on the phone, and I showed her one of the Christian books that we had, and she asked me, "Are you Seventh-day Adventist?" I was like, "Yeah, I am." And she was like, "Oh, well, my neighbor's Seventh-day Adventist. Let me call her and tell her to get a book from you." So I went to the next house, and she ended up getting a book, and I ended up praying with this blind man who does like a prayer ministry for other people, and it was just quite an amazing experience, the interactions that I had. And I remember at the end of that street that I realized that God answered my prayer. And the rest of the summer, as I knocked on doors and as I met different people, I saw a lot of the pain that was just around me. And I saw how God was using me to reach out to these people who were in pain. And during that canvassing program, I realized that I wanted to follow God. But the only thing was, I had been in this place so many times before. And every single time I made a decision to follow God, it always ended up in me falling away later. And so I realized that I needed a change of environment. I ended up taking a year off of school, and I went to a small Bible college in Arkansas. And after that, I went back to Michigan State University and got involved in public campus ministries. I used to think that Christianity was going to be boring and bland, and I would have nothing to do. But all I can say is, there is nothing more exciting and definitely more fulfilling than an adventure every single day with Jesus. All I had to do was give him a chance.
All right, now already, Pastor Camille, we've already heard several stories from young people whose lives have been personally impacted by this. And wonderful as that is there a broader impact than just on individual young people as they do this literature work? What's the ultimate aim, and how far is this impact supposed to go?
You know, that's the neat thing about this ministry, that while it impacts our young people, they themselves make great impact in the communities. You know, imagine this, in the summertime, they're knocking around 300,000 doors. They distribute 200,000 glow tracts, 50,000 books. And so people are receiving those books, and of course their lives are being impacted by this.
So it's obviously it's a deep impact for the individual, but hopefully by God's grace, those books, the literature that's going out, is having impacts that we may not even see right now.
Well, I love the quote from Ellen White, which she says, "More than 1,000 will soon be converted in one day, and most of them will trace their first convictions to the reading of our publications." What that means is that once somebody walks into the evangelistic meetings and they listen to the message about the Sabbath, there's a good chance they have read about the Sabbath already. And, you know, that being convicted, and so much easier for them to make the decision.
Powerful. Well, we have a special testimony from Olivia now about the greater impact that can be had through this special literature work.
I was canvassing industrial businesses at the end of a morning, and I walked into one business knowing that it would be my last based on how much time was left. And so I just said hello. It was a mechanic shop, and I couldn't see anybody that was around. But eventually a lady came in from the back, and she just looked like she had been having a bad day. And it turns out that she had. What I didn't know at the time was that she had just come to the end of a very difficult situation in her life that morning, and it was just really discouraging her. I just said hello and shared with her what we were doing. I shared with her the health books, and she was kind of interested, but not really. And she just asked me, "Oh, what religion are you?" And so I shared with her in the back, "Oh, we're working with the famous Blue Bible Story Company. Have you heard of us?" And she said, "Oh, no, what religion? What church are you?" And so I took a deep breath and I said a prayer and I said, "Oh, we're Seventh-day Adventist Christians. Have you heard of us?" And she just stopped and looked at me, and her whole face lit up, and I wasn't expecting that. But she just smiled and she said, "You're a Seventh-day Adventist? I want to be a Seventh-day Adventist." And so our conversation just really took off from there. She shared that she was a homeschool mom, and over the past 15, 20 years, through educating her children, trying to give them a Bible-based education, she had been studying the Bible through different Bible study guides from different denominations, and God had been showing her in the Bible the truth about the Sabbath and what happens when we die, and also about how God wants us to be healthy through the health message too. And so I shared with her that, yes, this is things that I believe too that the Bible teaches. And she was so excited because she'd heard of Adventists and was curious about learning more, but she just never had really had an opportunity to look into attending a church in the area. And so I said another prayer, and I just invited her, if she was interested, that she was welcome to come and visit the church that my friends and I were staying at for the summer as we did our program. And she was very interested in coming, and she just gave me her number so that we could be in contact. Before I left, I was able to pray with her, and we were both able to recognize that this was definitely a divine appointment that only God could have arranged because she'd been going through so much lately. So I left her with Christ Object Lessons and also the Desire of Ages. But the story didn't end there, because 2 weeks later, she was able to come to church and to worship and pray and sing with my friends and I. And she had such a wonderful experience. And she told me later, just as we were standing in the foyer, just sort of praising God together and praying together for each other, just how good God has been to both of us and making sure that our paths had crossed. And she shared with me that this was the first time she felt at home in a church in a long time, just with people who were welcoming and wanted to follow God and all the truths in the Bible too. It was one of the biggest blessings of my life to stand and talk with her in the foyer after church service and to just recount how God had blessed and to realize that He had been arranging this day's experience and that of 2 weeks before for 15 or 20 years before we had ever met, really almost before I was born. And just continue to pray for her and her family as they continue to follow in the light that God is giving them, and to realize that God is always faithful to those who are seeking for Him.
All right, now I have to bring up the awkward question. We've had a lot of great testimonies of things that have happened in the past, but in the present, there's a little bit of difficulty right now. In fact, we're just coming through this COVID crisis and the pandemic. And how has that impacted future plans, particularly this year's Youth Rush program?
Yeah, we've watched this situation arise, and we just waiting when it's over. When it's over, and it's not getting over. But we brainstorm and we realize we have young people that want to be working for God. And really, this is the time when people are searching, and it's not time to be silent right now. And so we came together and said, let's do something.
Okay, so we're going to get into what that something is in our next section. But right now, take a listen to what Sarah has to say in her testimony.
I met Kevin out on his driveway one afternoon, and as I walked up to him, I noticed that his yard was full of broken alcohol bottles. So I started my canvas with the Ministry of Healing, and I told him about it and how it helps us overcome addictions. And he didn't say anything, but he held the book in his hand really tight. So I showed him the next book, The Great Controversy, and I shared with him how it covers the last 2,000 years. And as soon as I said that, he handed the book back to me and he said, "I don't care what happens in the last 2,000 years. I want to know what's next." And I was really confused, and so I said, "What do you mean?" As soon as I asked that question, he got really emotional and he said, "My son died a couple years ago, and I want to know what's next." And then I realized what this man was saying. He didn't know if there was any hope. So I prayed for wisdom and I handed The Great Controversy back to him and I said, "Sir, this book not only covers the last 2,000 years, but also tells us what's happening in the future. It helps answers questions like, what happens after death? Why would a God of love allow so much pain and suffering? And then it climaxes with the second coming of Jesus, our hope." And after I shared that with him, he silently reached into his pocket, pulled out some money, and handed it to me. and took both books, and I said, "Sir, can I pray with you before I go?" And he nodded his head. I prayed with him, and I just pled with God to give him hope and comfort and peace. And as soon as I finished praying, the man gave me a big hug, and he quietly turned around and walked into his house. But when he hugged me, I could smell the alcohol in his breath, and I realized that this was a hurting man, someone who didn't want to be addicted to alcohol, but who hadn't found a solution for his pain. So as I went back out onto the street, I just stopped to pray for him, and I just pled with God again for him and for his situation. And as I was thinking about him, I remembered that on the back of the Desire of Ages that we carry, there's a quote that says, "Through all our trials, we have a never-failing helper." So I thought, oh, I must give this book to him. And he had given enough in donations anyway, so I walked back to his house and I knocked on his door to give him the Desire of Ages. But no one came to the door. And I knocked, and then it dawned on me that he was so hard of hearing that he couldn't hear my knock on the door. And I realized that if it hadn't been for God bringing him outside at the time that I arrived, I may have very well never met him. God cares so much for him that he brought him outside so I could minister to him. So I wrote him a note, I left the Desire of Ages on his door, and I walked away, and I thought, wow, here was someone searching for the truth that we have in such desperate need of it, and why would God choose me to go to his door? God could have sent an angel, he could have reached him any other way, but he chose me to go. And so I thank God for arranging circumstances so perfectly, and at that moment I also rededicated myself to God and asked him to help me to labor tirelessly to reach souls for the rest of the summer.
All right, another powerful testimony was just shared, but let's come back to what we were discussing a minute ago. So obviously we've had these new pandemic problems and stresses that have come, especially when it comes to scheduling and planning. So what has the Youth Rush, what has the Literature Ministries Department done, or what are the plans for this summer given our current circumstance?
Yeah, so what we had to do is we had to postpone the whole summer by 1 month. So we're starting July 6th, and we still will be utilizing young people. We still will be able to share the powerful messages in our books, but it's going to be different. And so we'll be using a lot of technology to do that. We'll be using our phones, computers, social media to accomplish that.
Okay, so the goals, the objectives of the Youth Rush program are still the same, but you're thinking of new ways to adapt to that. And you're going to start a delayed start starting July 6th, and you're going to incorporate more technology this year than maybe in previous years. But the work will go on in a modified way.
It will.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Now, let's have another testimony, shall we? Take a look at what this young man had to say.
I remember getting out the van. Around that time, I was praying for God to really just show me that he's real, and I was praying that for a while. And as I'm going forward on that street, I see some apartments. I'm like, you know, I might as well hit these too. So I start from the top floor going down, and I'm knocking on doors, I'm trying, you know. Several people were home, so that was pretty cool, but still nothing just seemed to be going out that day. And as I'm reaching this bottom floor, I knock on this door. And this lady through the door, you know, the door's not even open yet, but she's asking, oh, who is it? And I just say, oh, my name's just Junior, I'm just a student. And she opens the door just a crack, and she's still not able to see me. I'm still not able to see her. But I begin canvassing her. You know, I'm trying to slide a book through the door, and, you know, she still doesn't want to hear what I have to say. But I end up just asking her, like, do you have any religious backgrounds or anything like that? And then from there, she actually opens the door to see who I am. And, you know, she just sees like a regular young guy. And then from there, I just felt the need to just canvass her on peace above the storm, which is steps to Christ. And as I'm canvassing her, I began to explain to her, like, I'm actually right now reading this book. It's an amazing book. And as I'm showing her, I'm flipping through the pages with her. I end up going to the page where Come Thou Fountain, the song is on. And I end up singing the first verse for this older lady. And as I'm singing this verse, she's still hearing what I have to say. And then through that, I connect on why I'm actually doing this work. As I'm speaking, and I began to see that tears are actually coming from this lady's face. And she's like, You're an angel. God sent you at the right time. You are God sent. God sent you here. And I began to explain to this lady, like, no, I know I'm not an angel. Trust me, ma'am, I'm not an angel. She's like, no, you're an angel. God sent you here. And, she began to explain to me that right now she's just going through many different struggles that she really just did not expect to be going through at the time. And, she really just begins to open up to me. And she's like, no, I just have to help. I just have to help you. So she goes inside to get money to help me. And, at this point, she's hugging the book. She's just happy. She wants this book. And she tells me that I can't go unless I sign the back cover of her book. So I signed the back cover of her book, and I leave a little paragraph of just words of encouragement. The reason why that story was so powerful to me was, of course, I seen at that moment that God has answered a prayer for her at the right time, where, the time that she needed, a co-porter came to her door, just telling her that Jesus really loves her. And through that situation, God answered a prayer for me. Because for so long, I was praying for God to really show me that He is real. To show me just something that He's real. And through that, I can really say that God is real and that He is love.
All right, Camille Jr. gives us a powerful testimony, but we still come back to, let's get some more detail about this summer. A delayed start, more technology, but what's actually that going to look like in real terms?
So number one, we are bringing those young people together, because in order to do discipleship or disciple young people, we have to bring them together. So they will be coming together for discipleship, for training. We'll also be incorporating also community service work. So we're working with out of this community service department, we're looking at what are the needs in the communities. And part of the day, we'll be actually spending time in the community helping people. And then the second part of the day, we will be focusing on phone missions. That means we'll be calling our friends and relatives and co-workers and seeing who is willing to sponsor sharing books that we can then deliver in their counties.
Interesting, okay.
But still there's a need for a spiritual training, a little bit more, because when you knock on doors, you pray more, and this environment will not exactly provide that for us. And for that reason, we are including the SEAL program. Now, what is exactly SEAL all about? We'll find out after Lara shares a powerful story with us.
I was canvassing, and as I was going door to door, I was praying that God would give me a divine appointment. I felt like I really needed that experience to continue growing in faith in God, and the thought came into my mind after I had prayed that to just trust and obey God and keep going. So as I kept going, it was about like 30 minutes later, and I got to the end of my street, and there was a car wash at the end. I normally don't do businesses, but I decided to do it anyways. So I went around the business, and I see this man outside of his car on his phone. So I go up to him and I start canvassing him, but he's really not interested. He's on his phone, and he was like, yeah. And after a while, he started asking me questions about what we were doing, about the books, and he got really interested and started telling me how when he was young, he was interested in the Bible. But when he went to the army, he saw things that really disturbed his view on God. And he knew there was a higher power, but not much other than that. And he kept telling me how Christians weren't reflecting the Christ they worshipped. So I showed him The Great Controversy and how the book was about the conflict between good and evil throughout all of history. And what God intended Christianity to be was not what it turned out to be. And so he ended up being very interested in all of the spiritual books I had, including The Steps to Christ and Great Controversy. So he got all of them, and I offered to pray with him before leaving, and he was like, wow, I haven't prayed in years. And so I was like, great, this is the perfect time to pray. So I prayed with him, and it was such a blessing for him, the prayer and the books. He was very thankful, and I was very thankful as well. Because God had given me the divine appointment that I had been asking for just 30 minutes before. And so it was just a great blessing to see that God would even use me to help someone else, to share His gospel. And this experience has helped me a lot to have more faith and trust in God. And it's experiences like this that make canvassing worthwhile.
So what is SEAL all about?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. SEAL, the acronym, it means Summer Evangelism and Leadership Training. In the last couple of years, we've talked about our department from Sabbath School Personal Ministries partnering with the Literature Ministries Department. They For the young people who come and do the youth rush work, it's more than just, like you said, it's more than just, you know, making money or going to X number of doors and just trying to go through what you want is a full, a broad, rich experience that these young people can have. And obviously, we want them to be literature evangelists or any kind of evangelist. We want them to be missionaries whenever they go back to their homes, their home churches, and their schools, wherever they go. And so the idea was brought up, what if we could make a more intentional element of spiritual preparation and evangelism training as part of their literature work for the summer? And so SEAL was that summer evangelism and leadership training that the Personal Ministries Department, in partnership with the Literature Ministries
So
Department.
who are some of the presenters?
Well, I've been a presenter myself. We've had Pastor Mark Howard, we have Pastor Wes Peppers, and a lot of the good pastors who have been evangelists in their own right or have had experience in these kind of areas. And it's been a success. We've started in a limited amount. We were going to expand it really, really big this year and make it a big, but then again, COVID hit. And so we've had to do some adapting. And so you're going to see a modified SEAL program this year. I don't even know if we're going to end up calling it SEAL. I don't know, because we're still adapting to that. But basically saying, all right, what are the needs of the Youth Rush program and what are the opportunities that are unique to this circumstance, and how can we provide that same level or at least some element of those benefits that we saw in previous years and adapt it to this new circumstance. So we're currently in the process of figuring out exactly what the schedule is going to look like, but there will be a special training for these young people beyond just phone calls and the literature, logistics. We want to see a deepening of their walk with Christ. We want to see them have good personal devotions. We want to have that grow mindset in their DNA so that when they leave this summer program, it's not just an event they did, but it's now a part of their life going forward. So we anticipate success with that, even though we're not exactly sure what it'll look like. It's going to be part of the program for sure.
And what's neat is that anyone can be part of it because we'll be going live on social media.
Ooh.
So I think we're going to go big.
That would be great.
Now I think it's time for another exciting story. And this is a story about Daniel and how he came into the church and how he himself became a missionary as well.
When I was 5 years old, I accepted the Lord, but I ended up growing up in bad neighborhoods and involved with gangs, drugs, money, women, you name it. I've been homeless. I caught my first case at 8, but through all of it, God never left my side. Every time that I cried out to him, he was right there. And it was like he never left my side. I felt him as soon as I started praying, he was already there. Even if I was thinking about it, he was right there. So as I continued growing, the Lord kept doing these things which made me believe in him. And so when he finally got a hold of me and I finally submit to him, I started going to church and seeking his truth. And so I was going from church to church to church to church, trying to get his truth, and was asking everybody for Bible study, and nobody would give me Bible study. And it made me feel like, wow, I can't even get a Bible study. Well, I'm gonna do it by myself then, with me and God. And there's a reason for that. I was working in a construction area, and this guy come up selling books. And I walked over to him, and I noticed he had some Bible literature stuff. And so I said, man, do you do Bible study? Because at this time, nobody would give me Bible studies. And he said, well, I don't, but I can send somebody your way who can. And so he wrote my information down, and next thing you know, I had a guy come to my house whose name was Dennis, and he gave me Bible studies, and he started proving to me that Saturday is the actual day of the Sabbath. I never knew that. I always thought it was Sunday. And so that spoke to my heart, and from that moment on, I started to seek truth. Even though I didn't have much knowledge in the Bible, I started passing out the Great Controversy and literature and stuff like that, going door to door. And even this Sabbath, this week, today, a guy came from an area where I went and evangelized, and he came to church today. He was actually going to commit suicide, but he actually came to church today, and the Lord used me. And so going door to door does work. I got numerous of other people that I could talk about. And whether it's literature, whether it's just saying, hey, how's it going? Do you believe in Jesus? Anything. But giving these books give you an opportunity to speak to them. So
So I found myself in the middle of the summer just thinking about quitting and heading home. I was at my lowest point, and it was at that time that I received a text from one of my former leaders with a Bible study contact information all filled out and my name at the bottom. And he said, "Dino, do you recognize this Bible study contact?" And I said that I did not, for I had handed out many different Bible studies to different people during my time canvassing. And when I just realized what God had done in Daniel's life, what God had done in my life, in just connecting the two of us at the perfect time, I just started to cry, and I couldn't believe that God really used me to make an impact. And that encouraged me this summer to just keep doing the work that God gave me to do this summer.
And the Lord has been doing such great things in my life. And now He's brought me to the point to where I'm going to go to a Bible school so that I can learn to be an evangelist, so that I can serve Him for the rest of my life, because He is my life.
It is my privilege to baptize you as a minister of the gospel in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
All right, Camille, so we've talked about what Youth Rush has been, how it's going to adapt for this summer, and there's going to be modifications. Is that everything that literature is doing? Is there anything more that's happening with the literature work this summer in Michigan?
You know, every summer we think about our young people. You know, they go out and they raise money for school and they distribute powerful books in people's homes, but it's really about receiving. The whole summer is about receiving, whether it's spiritual blessing or monetary blessings, right? And so I thought about what can we do to teach them other lessons. And so in the past 4 years, we have set aside one day in the summertime, and they could just decide, that was up to them, but they could decide to actually donate their day's earnings towards missions.
Ooh.
So in one day in the summer, they would do what is called canvassing for missions. And it's just so much fun because the young people will come and say, you know, today I'm working for the Lord. I'm going to get out more books than ever before. I'm going to raise more money because I'm not doing this for myself right now. I'm doing this for God. And it's true. They would get more books out and raise more money than any other day of the summer. Now, this is a real inspiration to us. And they will raise the money, and then we would work with the General Conference and send money to Russia or Venezuela, or we've sent money to Asia. We were looking at projects that you know, where there's great need. But we were thinking that we really want to expand. While we have young people canvassing for missions, we will be inviting church members to work for missions that day. So that one day in July, while our canvassers are working, dedicating that earned money to a project, and we have a number of projects. We're looking at projects in Africa and India and in Hong Kong and other places around the world. And so we'll be inviting the church members to do the same that day. Dedicate portion or that day's wages for missions. So we'll have GoFundMe account, and we'll be sharing those on social media as we get closer to the date.
Sounds very innovative, but it's all for the furthering the mission.
Amen.
It's beautiful.
Amen.
Now, at this point, we're going to play a special musical feature, but this is special in the sense that it's not just a musical number, but this was actually written by a canvasser, performed by a canvasser, edited and everything put together by canvassers in this work. So enjoy this piece of special music.
He's coming soon, just a little longer. Don't be impatient, use your time wisely. Stand firm in your faith, endure the small things, 'cause when it's over, you'll be much stronger. It's worth the effort. Oh, hallelujah. Heaven is cheap enough. Oh, hallelujah. So when the doors are shut in your face, go to another. Someone is waiting to be invited to heaven's banquet, so they can meet their eternal family. It's worth the effort. Oh, hallelujah. Heaven is cheap enough. Oh, hallelujah. Then up in heaven, Jesus will greet us. He'll say to each one, well done, good servant. And then we'll meet those familiar faces we helped direct to our precious Savior. It's worth the effort. Oh, hallelujah. Heaven is cheap enough. Oh, hallelujah. It's worth the effort. Oh, hallelujah. Heaven is cheap enough. Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I don't know about you, Camille, but it is so inspiring not only to hear the music, but especially to hear those testimonies of people, young people who've been out there on the front lines doing this literature canvassing work. It's just a blessing to even witness their experience.
You know, it's a privilege to work with young people. It's really a privilege to work with our church members and to collaborate with different ministries like Sabbath School Person Ministries Department. It's just a great privilege to work for God.
Amen. And friends, we want to close down this program with a reminder that this is not just a thing that we want to watch and cheer on from the sidelines. Go young people, go do that summer. But the realization, and I think you'd agree with this, Camille, is that every one of us is supposed to be a literature evangelist. Every one of us is a canvasser, a soul winner for Christ. And I would encourage you, and I know that we have the author here with us here, but Camille Metz and The Open Door, a foreword by John Bradshaw. I think there's elements by Mark Howard in here, a lot of good contributions in this book. But if you're looking for a book that will help you think about the literature work, maybe in a new light, and look for the opportunities around you, we'd encourage you to take a look at this book. I believe it's available through the ABC or through the Literature Ministries Department directly, even on Amazon. But there's ways to get hold of this book. If you'd like to think about the literature work and how you can be a part of it and be inspired to do more for the Lord, please don't just cheer on from the sidelines or watch other people be a minister, but be a minister yourself. Be a missionary for Jesus even now. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Sabbath.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, all of our live stream audience. And I want to invite you back at 6:30. This will be a live event here at the Village Church. So if you're in the area and you would like to attend, you're more than welcome. And again, God bless, and we appreciate you viewing with us. Thank you.